Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tuesday Training. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday Training for practitioners. I'm so happy to have you guys here in the house with me today. We got Kathy and Joshua and Gary. Hello. It's nice to see everybody. Hello, Gary. I'm glad you guys are here. We're talking sacrum structure today, which is always some fun for me. I got pop-ups on my screen. I hope you guys are getting less pop-ups than me because that's anyway. Hi. Back for Tuesday Training for practitioners. We're talking sacrum structure. If you are here on the replay, hello, replay. I now have a fancy way of being able to see analytics. Tech is not my horse, guys. Anatomy is my horse. So when I get a tech win, I get very excited. And so now I have tech intel that tells me there's lots of you here watching on the replay. So hi, I'm so glad you're here. And if you are here watching on the replay, go ahead and like the video so that we can see that you're here. And definitely, if there's some value for you here, let us know that there was value. I love that. We're going to talk today about the sacral structure, as I mentioned now, and we're going to sort of volley this off of one of the quizzes. We put a pop quiz every month in our practitioner newsletter. Gary, you answered it. You don't remember it, but you answered it. I have your answers recorded. Yeah, we have a pop quiz every month. The top of the month, we put a practitioner newsletter out. So for manual and movement practitioners, we do a snapshot of all the training that's available for the month. And in that training newsletter, I also put a pop quiz in there because they're super fun. I love seeing how smart you guys are. I love reading your answers. I love when you engage with the pop quizzes. So these are super fun for me. So I was going to ask for a show of hands, but Gary, you're not remembering if you took the quiz? Because I remember that you took the quiz. Do you remember the quiz? No. Okay. Over your head. That's all right. Hey, Cheryl, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, we did 2 sacrum quizzes so far. We also did a gut health tied to low back pain quiz. Those were the last 3 months of pop quizzes that we put in our newsletter. You have to remember those because we had bum links and stuff. So we had to send them over again. I'm like, oh my gosh, the emoji with the hand over her face, like, oh, blank. That was me for a couple times. Anyway, I'm glad you don't feel like we over emailed you because that's always my fear there. However, we are going to reference the quiz, and it's okay if you don't remember taking it or not, because I'll bring us full circle around that. But I want to make sure that we have clarity around the quiz questions and specifically the structure that identifies the sacrum in the body and why identifying the sacrum structure in the body, ooh, tongue-tied, why that matters. Hey, Anna, I'm glad you're here. Anna had a huge win this week. Ooh, baby, we love it. So we're going to go over the quiz. I'm going to reference the quiz questions for you. Don't worry about it if you don't have them memorized. It's okay. But the takeaway really about why I want you to have the clarity around the sacrum's structure plays a huge part in not only identifying structural issues, but also the genesis of them, right? Not just the issues, but the genesis, like where does it come from? And we've been talking about that in the last month as we've been going over common diagnoses. Like, how many of those common diagnoses do you remember us tying directly back to the sacrum? More than half? Yeah, exactly. So we want to really have a hold on the sacrum, I guess, pun intended. You really want to put your hands on that bad boy as the keystone. You really want to have a hold on it, a handle on it, and understand its significance. So that's what I want to talk about today, the structural significance of the sacrum, because knowing that helps you find the genesis, and it also dramatically changes your treatment plan, by the way. So rather than spinning around where all the chief complaint is and the diagnoses might be and all the things, if we understand the sacrum, we can get right to the core of it. Hey, Rhonda, I'm glad you're here. Which leads me to our sponsor for today's Tuesday training, practitioner training, is our Sacred Sacrum course, which is very exciting. This is the first time we're running this course live in several years. And it was because of you guys, my Tuesday training pod. You all were like, hey, let's do a more more of a deep dive into the sacrum. And then we had a master class in the spring and it was brought up again. So we're doing it. We're doing Sacred Sacrum live, October 2nd to November 20th. We're going to meet for 16 hours over 8 weeks. just about a month away. So if you're needing to make any adjustments to your schedule, or you want to make sure you lock that into your calendar, October 2nd is our start date. And I can't wait. For those of you who are ready to go, chomping at the bit, like, hello, that's why I'm here today, Gina. It's a month from now. We have bonus training. So each week, for those of you who register now for the Sacred Sacrum course, you'll get extra training that goes with it, including we're meeting tomorrow for a study group. So for those of you who are already registered, your first bonus training is already coming up. So you're welcome to join us for that. I know Cheryl and Rhonda and Gary, you're all enrolled in the Sacred Sacrum course. Super excited to have you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. How long is that tomorrow? Is that a 1 hour?
It's a 1 hour. Yep.
Okay.
Only for Sacred Sacrum peeps. We're going to dive in. So maybe you'll have some launching pad from today's training to bring with you to that group study hall. Probably like a group study hall, but we're studying. For me, okay, change the subject here. When folks say study hall, I like that idea. It's like a hall of people studying together, but that was not my experience of study hall in high school. You had to be freaking quiet, because I know this because I am not quiet. I got sent out of study hall more times than I was allowed to stay. So it's really challenging for me to bring study hall into a like descriptor here, because I don't want anyone to feel like they're kicked out. It's the opposite. You're welcome to come in. Hey, Perry, I'm glad you're here. So it's like a study hall for the folks who are registered for the Sacred Sacrum course. Cheryl, getting back to your specific question, and we're going to meet it for an hour. And the way the study group is going to go, study group hall is going to go, is it's not structured. So you don't have to come, stressed out or anything like that. It's really extra training. So what do you need to know? What is your curiosity already? What questions do you have, so that you can feel really ramped up and ready to go day one when the course starts, October 2nd. So bring any questions you have is the invitation. Bring any questions you have, any concerns you have, maybe old ways you used to work with the sacrum that you're not sure if they're effective. That type of stuff is what we'll use the study hall for. Once we get into the program, I run the curriculum, so you've got to follow my slides then. So it's really open-ended, which is part of the beauty of having that extra training hour. So please feel free to come and join us for that. Those of you who signed up, you have that link in your bonus emails. You've been getting those. So certainly let me know if you don't have it, but find the link today so that you can make it there tomorrow. And I know Lori and Katie and Brittany are also enrolled, so there could be a nice group of us there. And anybody here who's listening, you are welcome to join us. I'll plug you right into that study group tomorrow if you want to do that. I would love to see you there. I would also love to see you in the course, because it's really a game changer. Literally, the way I work clinically is so sacrum-centric. It's tempting as a trainer just to cut through all the noise and say there's nothing else you need to know. That's not exactly true, and it also minimizes the magnificence of the rest of the body. But I'm sharing that phrase just to land the weight of it, right? Like the significance of understanding the sacrum and its job, and how it shows up when things are going wrong, and how it's the genesis of 90+%. I'm making up that number. I don't have clinical numbers on that, but it is literally the genesis of so much. I would say in 31 years working clinically, there's maybe 2 people I didn't start on their sacrum. In 31 years. It's just so central to what is plaguing musculoskeletal pain, right up from aches and pains to diagnoses and everything in between. It's always in the mix. And at first, I wondered if I was just like making it up. It's kind of like looking for, like a sunspot. Soon, like your reticular activating system is just going to keep finding the thing that you're focused on. And I thought, well, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe I'm just keep seeing it because I want to see it, because it's on my mind. But the truth is that when I balance the sacrum, even if I haven't addressed anything else in a treatment, there's always an immediate positive response. So it's not just that my reticular activating system is picking up the misalignment in the sacrum, it's that it literally is directly tied to chief complaint symptoms and the source of what's causing people's discomfort. And I do have clinical evidence on that. So I was onto something early when I liked this bone, And then seeing how impactful it was, sort of blew my mind in a positive way. And now, ever since then, I've been working to make it the most efficient approach. And that's ultimately what the mastery practitioner training is about. Like, how do you keep the sacrum centric to your treatment plan? And what do you get to do about it so that you make strides fast? And so that's what we're up to. So I love this course. I love the sacrum course. Did somebody have their hand up? Anna, was your hand up? No. Okay. I thought I saw it at the corner of my eye, hand raised, and I wanted to make sure I didn't lose my track. Okay. So sacrum structure today and the significance of the sacrum structure. We're going to do a little tiny recap on the quiz. Again, for those of you who came in just after the top of our hour, we're referencing back to the first pop quiz on the sacrum that we sent out a couple months ago. I've been waiting for us to get to this point on Tuesday training because we were working through so many common diagnoses, because I really wanted to come back to this quiz. So the quiz question was, what part of the skeleton is the sacrum? What part of the skeleton is the sacrum? And there were 4 possible answers: appendicular, spine, axial, and tailbone. You guys remembering this quiz now? Gary's like, now I remember what you're talking about. Okay, yay, awesome. Do you happen to remember your answer? Do you guys remember what you answered? You do? You want to say it? Gary, can you? No, you don't remember? Appendicular, spine, axial, or tailbone?
I think I said axial.
Axial?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me too.
Cheryl, you too? Anna, you're nodding? Yeah, you're like, of course. Okay, great. So axial skeleton. Okay, cool. Well, I'm super happy that no one said appendicular skeleton. None of you all, and there's hundreds of you who received that quiz and filled out the answers. So thanks for playing, because I love reading them. It fills my inbox. Like, I'm on the day that the newsletter comes out and I get all these answers that pop up and fill my inbox. It's like Christmas for me. I'm like, oh, they're playing sacrum today with me today. It's so exciting. So I love, and I read every single answer. And the reason is because I want to know how smart you are and play shop with you, because that's super fun. And also it helps me know how I can support and what I get to pour into and where the gaps might be, so that you can understand more thoroughly what you already are present to. So I love that nobody answered appendicular skeleton. Out of all the possible folks who answered, there wasn't even a misclick where somebody accidentally clicked appendicular skeleton. So yay us, we did it, woohoo! So our focus for today is the distinction between the axial skeleton, the spine, and the tailbone. And that matters to me that you guys know the distinction between those 3 as it relates to the sacrum, because of all the things I already said. It changes how you look at the body, it changes your treatment plan, it changes what you do about someone's pain, and being able to find the genesis. So let's review briefly. What makes up the axial skeleton? Those of you who are here who said you remembered your answer, you all said axial skeleton. What is the axial skeleton? What comprised of what parts? Comprised of what parts is the axial skeleton? And I'm going to hold Murph on his side so you guys can see him fully. Stem to stern. What parts make up the axial skeleton? And if you're hesitating because you think you got that wrong, you didn't. We're just going to make the distinction between the sacrum and the axial skeleton, the sacrum and the spine, and the sacrum and the tailbone. So what is the axial skeleton?
Anyone?
Rhonda? Go, Rhonda. Go, Rhonda.
Lumbar, thoracic, cervical, spine. I believe is the head also part of it, the skull?
Mm-hmm. Part of the axial skeleton, yes.
And the sacrum.
And the sacrum.
The coccyx.
Coccyx.
Oh,
One
and
more.
the hip bones and the ribs.
Not the hip bones.
No. Okay.
But the ribs. Yep.
Okay.
Ribs. Yep. All axial. Hip bones. I don't want to get too, you heard me sigh. I'm like, oh, Gina, don't go too far down the rabbit hole. The hip bones, the innominants, or the ox coxa, are appendicular. They're part of the appendages, which makes up part of this fascinating structure that plays a part to the sacrum's role. because it literally is adjacent to appendicular and axial and weight bearing. It's incredible. All right. So axial skeleton, that's where we're at. Axial skeleton is cranium, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccyx, and cage, rib cage. Perfect. Axial skeleton. If you were to take away everything else on Murph, if he wasn't bolted and I could disassemble him, he would look like a seahorse, an amoeba, sort of just no-legged, right? And still able to move around. But that's not us. We're not amoebas and we don't live in the water. So we do need our appendages. They're important. And not today, but we will talk definitely in the sacrum course. There is a huge impact on the sacrum from the legs. And it's still sacrum first, but what the legs are communicating back to the sacrum play a huge part in how happy the sacrum is and everything else it does. We're not going to talk that today. So but I'm emphasizing it because I don't want you to think appendages don't matter. Oh, they do. They largely do. Big deal. So axial skeleton, we got that. Now, what part of the body is the spine? It's a trick question because it's so easy. What part of the body is the spine? What skeleton is the spine part of? We just said it. Axial, right. Trick question, too easy. I know, it's so easy. It's like not even, gosh, come on, Gina, we know more than that. I know. So the spine is part of the axial skeleton. Notice they're connected. Now, what makes up the spine?
The vertebra?
Yeah. Hey, Joshua, good to have you. Which vertebra? Good start, Cheryl. All of them, all the way up. Great. Which ones are vertebra?
Which ones?
Mm-hmm. So if I were to say, point to all the vertebrae that make up the spine, which ones would you point to?
All of them.
From where to where?
Coccyx up.
Coccyx up. Oh, so if the coccyx up is vertebra and vertebra make up the spine, then the coccyx and the sacrum are part of the spine. Right. Half the folks who filled out the pop quiz did not include the sacrum in the spine, only in the axial skeleton. And there were multiple choices. You could answer more than one. So if someone's like, well, but Gina, I answered the one that included that. There were multiple answers available though. And it's okay. And here's why I want you to know that. Because again, it's not whether you got the question right. It's what does the information mean to you?
Hmm.
When we're working on alignment, and most of you are, you're working on creating therapeutic treatment plans, orthopedic results, addressing big time chief complaint issues, and you want to solve it. And I'm appealing to you that it's sacrum centric. That matters then that you treat the sacrum with the spine to get the best results. And you've heard me say this before, that it's how many curves of the spine? 4. Ding, ding, ding. What are they? Let's just call them off. Let's make our mirror neurons very happy. What are the 4 curves of the spine?
Sacral, lumbar, thoracic, cervical.
Exactly. Sacral, lumbar, thoracic, and cervical. 4 curves of the spine. 4 curves of the spine that all balance each other, need to be balanced with each other. If one moves out of alignment, it affects the other ones all the way up the pike. We'll talk about this in the course, the concave versus the convex. And then there's another law on top of that, craniosacral law. These all matter when we're addressing the sacrum as the genesis of a treatment plan. Let's just stay on spine for a minute. If you already are like, yeah, I get it, Gina. I agree with you. Sacrum is the keystone. We get to work on sacrum first, and you're just here, sacrum, 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 and more sacrum, and maybe an innominate or two, maybe a hip or two, and a sacrum and an innominate or two, and you're failing to connect that with the other 3 curves of the spine, you'll miss it. And the reason is because, again, of that distinction between appendicular and axial skeleton. If the entire axial skeleton is connected and balanced, and it is, and if we were designed without legs, we would still be able to buoyantly move around, provided we were in water, and we could, then that means there is a relationship between all four curves of the spine relative to function and movement. Even though we walk on our legs, there's still a relationship to function and movement from the sacrum all the way up the spine. And we know that by design, the four curves are balanced. So if we're only focused in a lens at the sacrum and we fail to connect the four curves together and their relationship to each other, we'll miss it, even when we believe it's sacrum-centric. So it's really important to grab that. The sacrum is the sacrum is the kingpin, the sacrum has all my reverence, and he's still connected to other really important parts that I have to include in my treatment plan, or he's still going to be negatively impacted, which means I won't have resolved it. Doesn't matter how savvy my technique is. I got to connect it. So it mattered to me in the quiz that you all could see in your mind and connect to, oh, it's spine and it's axial skeleton. It's part of the axial skeleton, but it's also part of the spine. It's not sort of like a lone wolf all by himself, structurally just sort of like adjacent to a couple other things. Literally part of the spine and the spine's design, which is four balanced curves necessary for movement. That's the takeaway. Do you see how like just having that connection would just change your focus a little bit? Did that happen for anybody? Okay, good, because that's my intention here. Okay, great. Bells are going off. Fantastic. Okay, and then the last question on the quiz. So we'll go over the quiz and then I'll open up to you guys for questions. The last question on the quiz was that I think maybe 2/3 of the people answered that the sacrum was part of the tailbone. So the question again was, what part of the skeleton is the sacrum? Is it appendicular, axial, spine, or tailbone? And about 2/3 of the folks who answered said tailbone. So what do you guys think about that? Is the sacrum part of the tailbone? Is the sacrum part of the tailbone? Is it? Why not, Rhonda?
Because they're different. So the sacrum is 5 fused vertebra. The coccyx, I think, is 3 fused vertebra.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do have a separating joint between them, and I believe a disc, but I'm not positive about that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
great.
Okay.
So go ahead, keep saying.
So that would give them separation and give them individuality of segmental movement.
Exactly. So exactly. It would be similar to saying that the sacrum is part of the tailbone, just like saying the sacrum is part of the lumbar spine. It's not true. The sacrum is part of the whole spine, but it's not the tailbone. The tailbone has its own joint, and this is important for those who are treating folks with broken tailbones or fractured tailbones, or right, it creates a different approach to your treatment plan. You can't just look at the sacrum and expect the sacrum to take care of what's happening at the tailbone. They're separate. They have an effect on each other, but they need to both be addressed in the same way the lumbar curve needs to be addressed. The lumbar vertebra needs to be addressed with the sacrum. Now, I think where it might get a little confusing, and I just want you to fine-tune think here. So it's not meant to be a trick question. It's just fine-tuning your thinking so not to paint too much of a wide brush stroke and sort of miss a detail that could really get you some results in your treatment. Where it might be confusing is the tailbone, the coccyx. Let me get you a right angle here. There, you can see him. It is, I would put him in the same curve of the spine as the sacrum, whereas the lumbar curve starts to go the opposite direction, right? One's concave and one's convex, and the coccyx continues in that same curve orientation as the sacrum, but he's not the sacrum. In the same way, the lumbar disc is not the sacrum. Just because they're next to each other doesn't make them part of each other. And I understand that the confusion might be because of the curves. So when you're looking at the sacrum, I want you to see the sacrum, of course. I want you to see it in relationship to the four curves, two convex and two concave, and a coccyx at the end, and not mistake that the sacrum is on its own or that the tailbone has no significance, because it absolutely does. And I would only be able to tell you that because I snapped mine right off, stuck them into my left butt cheek, and spent 2 years trying to fix that. And I became a sacrum wizard after that, because it does have a huge effect on your sacrum. It also has a huge effect on other things, though, too. I'm talking coccyx break. It dramatically alters your balance almost immediately. It dramatically affects your nervous system immediately. And I know that my whole body from the belly button down was quaking, like I had been given like I was coming off of an epidural after giving birth to twins, which I wasn't. I had just broken my tailbone only, and it was involuntary. I had no ability to control that. It prevented, so my nervous system was responding. And we're going to talk about the nerves that are also involved in the lumbosacral plexus and inside the pelvis in the course. That's one of the new additions I'm adding to the course this go around. That was not in our last run. The tailbone affects how well you can feel. For me, it affected how well I could feel my feet hitting the ground, which altered my gait, which threw off the use of my lever system. It also affected the ligaments at the base of my pelvic floor. So if my ligaments at the base of my pelvic floor were now affected, the bones could not be aligned to get the muscles to strengthen. So forget pelvic floor work. It's not going to happen if the ligaments are pulling the bones out of place. And there has to be a ligament there. This is why it matters that we recognize the tailbone as a joint and not just a part of the sacrum. Anywhere two bones meet is a joint. We know this. What holds those two bones adjacent to each other? What body part? Y'all are quietly letting me lip sync today. Yeah, ligaments.
Ligament.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So ligaments. If I know that there's two bones that are adjacent to each other, which is different than the sacrum, which is one bone that was separate at one time, but once we came out here on the planet, it was fused. We're good. Tailbone never fuses to the sacrum. There's a movable joint between the sacrum and the tailbone. Anywhere there's a movable joint where two bones are adjacent to each other, A, there's movement available. That's important for function. And B, there's a ligament there. Also important for function, and also directly impacts your treatment plan. Treating ligaments is very different than treating muscles. It just is. And they need different things. So knowing that the coccyx is separate from the sacrum and that it unfortunately can get into its own ball of wax, if it has in the body that you're serving, you get to know that and not only treat the sacrum and expect that the tailbone's going to come along. If that could have worked, I wouldn't have had a 2-year rehab from a broken tailbone. I would have just addressed the sacrum. I had already drank the Kool-Aid. Rhonda?
Doesn't I don't know if I want to call it a broken coccyx, but let's say a displaced coccyx also affect the colon, the anus, and the ability to sit?
Oh, yeah, there was no sitting. The only place, yeah, there was no sitting, there was no laying down. It was literally the most excruciating pain I've ever had. And, you know, whatever. They say you forget it. Sure. But I'm just kidding. I'm being a little dramatic for effect. I remember, though, having to walk around town with a towel to wrap a towel like a donut so that I could have my sit bones. And so I could have my sit bones not touching a surface. Now, here's the crazy part. Even when, this is why I was just like, wait, what? I have to think about this again. What? Even when we're sitting, our coccyx never touches a surface. So why would the break here at this joint be so freaking excruciating for me to sit here? I had optimal sitting. I teach optimal sitting for a living. I wasn't like rolled back and like half sitting on my sacrum like a slump. I wasn't doing that. I was like apexed. I was prime optimal sitting. And the pressure here was so immense because of this broken, dislocated joint. That's basically what it is. You dislocate the coccyx from the sacrum. I couldn't even understand how there was that much pressure going in. Well, I get it now. And maybe you do too.
The
Into the
glutes?
sit. It's always alignment first. You know our formula, alignment, strength, function. It goes in through the apexes, into the innominate, through to the sacrum, and then all of the weight-bearing load, which is part of our second quiz. And the ligaments here were and muscles were largely affected. They couldn't bear that load with the input coming in from the innominate. So the relationship, the architecture between the innominate and the sacrum is so precise and exact that any, I was going to say deformation. It wasn't really a deformation, but any not goodness.
Distortion?
Okay, we'll go with that one. Thanks. I really lost the word, Rhonda, but thanks for helping and bailing me out. I appreciate you. Yeah, any distortion in that connection between the innominate, the sacrum, and the coccyx are huge. What we typically focus on with knowledge, like I get it. How many people have you ever met in your lifetime with a broken tailbone? Up until today, did you even know one, right? Like, luckily, that doesn't happen as frequently as it could. However, how many of you have met people with SI joint pain? And all the hands go up, right? So we know that when the relationship between these bones in the pelvis is askew, that's better a word, when these bones in the pelvis are askew, there's discomfort. But we tend to only focus on the big hitters, like the SI joint. And my invitation is to think about all the joints as movable, especially as they adjoin with the sacrum. I'm really not doing great with words today, guys. As they butt up next to the sacrum, especially as those bones meet the sacrum, they have an impact on the entire rest of the structure. And when they're not aligned, there is pain. We know that as a general rule anywhere in the body, not just about the sacrum. When we are not aligned the way we're designed, there is pain and discomfort. When we are not using our body the way we are aligned and discomfort, there is pain and injury. That's a general rule. Just go with it. Like, assume it's true 100% of the time, because it is. So if I'm not aligned on the inside, then I'm going to have pain. And it's not only at my SI joint. It could also be in relationship to any of the other bones that are adjacent to each other that are supposed to be aligned. It just gets a little more heated when it's near the sacrum because of the significance of the sacrum as a structure to the entire structure. So until I believe, and I'm okay with it now, I believe that I got to have the experience of a broken tailbone so that I could really solidify my knowledge of the sacrum and the bones that are adjacent to it, the joints and their necessity and function, and then the ligaments, tendons, and muscles. I feel like I needed to go through that so that I could really have an inside understanding instead of just in my head, out of my head, and onto somebody else's body. I was in it. I was in it. It's kind of like when we do workshopping and I'm like, go ahead, stand up, try this in your body. And you're like, wow, totally new information. I tried it in my own body and this is what I felt. It's not the same as just taking good notes, right? So I believe that that's why I had that break and why it was so substantial, so that I could really understand more about the workings of the sacrum and then be able to explain it to you from an experiential place instead of just hovering over someone else on the table.
Sounds like a hard knocks lesson.
Pun intended. It was audible. I'll tell you that. There was a person in the room and she turned around and went like, what was that? and I didn't actually know at first. It was sort of like, your body does all the things that it does to protect you. But I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was a long time ago. So it matters to me, back to the quiz, that you guys have reverence for the tailbone and not just sort of lump it in with the sacrum. It's a movable joint. And that was part of my training as I was seeking support from other practitioners. And I could feel it sticking out on the left. And a colleague of mine who's a holistic chiropractor, I was like, how could my tailbone be over there though? And he goes, movable joint. And I was like, oh yeah. Sometimes when you're in it, you don't really know your own issues. Like we think we do, like, oh, my sacrum is probably blah, blah, blah. And then you're measured. You're like, oh, I didn't know those were my measurements. You think you can do yourself. You can't. And so as soon as he said movable joint, I was like, oh my God, it was so obvious. Of course, it's a movable joint. It can be dislocated. So the bone's over there now, just like if I broke any bone. But luckily it was only at the joint. It wasn't the vertebra itself. It was the joint. Good news about a movable joint, you can move it back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately what needed to have happen. You have a question, Anna? Yes.
I love that about you.
I love that about you. One of the many things I love about you.
So we know that the SI joint is a very, I don't know, would the word be a small joint? There's not a big gap, right? It's a narrow joint. Is that a better word? Where I'm going is, you see, I never thought or knew about the coccyx being there being a joint between the coccyx and the sacrum. So my question is, the SI joint is just it's not very movable. The innominate and the sacrum, it's a joint, but it's not that movable. Is the coccyx and the sacrum even less movable?
I appreciate your question. And I was just reaching for the book so I could give you some images on this. I would like you to think about it with a little bit of a revision. So first, I wouldn't describe this SI joint as a small joint. And I know, but think about it this way, Anna. Assume, just for ease, and I know some of you are going to send me a note and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Just please streamline this for me, just in the purpose of this conversation. Assume that all bones are adjacent to each other with the same amount of proximity, just for this conversation. Okay? There's not like these two bones are further apart and their ligaments are longer, and these two are right up next to each other, and so therefore there aren't. And I get it. The joints in the skull are different than the joints in the elbow, which are different than the SI joint. I hear you. So please, you guys listening to me on replay, don't come at me. And just for this conversation right now, assume that all joints have equal bone-to-bone proximity, just for now. Okay? Just for this conversation. Which then gets back to the size that you were talking about. And you're talking about, aren't they closer together versus wider apart? Just hang with me for a second. This SI joint is essentially where the sacrum and the innominate meet, and it is this line right here. That is a long line and a lot of real estate. That is a lot of a side of a bone. I wish I had a separate sacrum. It is a lot on the side of the sacrum and a lot on the innominate connecting it. It's just long. I'll show you the inside of Murph here. Look, you see the line? Wow, that's long. That's a lot. Okay, so I wouldn't want you to think of it as small. Part of, I think, where we get that visual from is it feels like a quarter-size spot of discomfort when folks are pointing at it, and we're like, oh, they're talking about their SI joint. And when we're measuring, as a shots method practitioner, which you are, when we're measuring it, our thumbs are there. So we think that it's only this, that they're super close together and it's only the size of my thumb. It's not. Okay, and because of its role in the body, The role of the joint matters, in my estimation, more than the distance between the two bones. The role of that joint matters more than the distance between the two bones. So that role of that joint is completely weight-bearing for the entire structure and its function. You can't give a joint a bigger job, except for maybe the joints in the cranium, which are designed to move a teeny little bit in case there's a need to absorb some of the impact should your head get smashed so that your brain doesn't, bruise. So it's really not about how close the bones are, it's about their role. God bless you. So that's number one. And then you mentioned its relationship to its movement ability relative to the coccyx and the sacrum. So we're going to use the same picture, but we're going to go downstairs. So this is the bottom of the sacrum, right? And it's this joint right here. And then there's one or two, sometimes people have three bones, and these are fused. The actual tail is fused, sort of like the little nub on the bottom is one nub, but there is a joint between it and the sacrum above it. So whether this is one or two little fused nubs, the coccyx is one, it has a joint above it adjacent to the sacrum. And that, while it's connected to the role of the sacrum, doesn't bear weight. You shouldn't have weight on your tailbone. It's part of the reason why I believe it's curled like that. Same curve as the sacrum. It's meant to be tucked under a tiny little bit for some protection. Now, little sidebar on this one. Gary, you're going to love this. This is in your wheelhouse. Because it's a movable joint and there's muscles and ligaments involved in that sacral coccyx conjunction there, it is movable just like any other joint is movable. And because it's not a weight bearing, like it doesn't show up when I do push-ups, for example, it can still move with other input, largely emotional. So for those of you who do Venn diagram work and emotional work, we do that here as well. There is some tucked under tailbones that are like scared puppies in human design, because the emotion is what drew the energy in that area that's now affected the soft tissue. So I don't talk a whole lot about that every week, but it's a component. We've talked Venn diagram in TSM work. And then that leads back to what you brought up, Rhonda. Well, isn't the misalignment in the pelvis from the innominate to the sacrum and the tailbone all contributing factors to digestive health? Yeah, of course, because we're made with the right design for everything to be aligned and in its place. If we're not aligned and things aren't in their place, they can't work. We know that about muscles. If the bones aren't aligned, the lever system can't be maximized. So why wouldn't it be true of organs? It is. That's one of the reasons why the rib cage is designed the way it is and the cranium is designed the way it is, so that those organs have assured clear distance in the space that they're supposed to live. One of the reasons, right? Mm-hmm. The organs that are below the xiphoid process, the bottom of the rib cage, between here and here, get your leg out of your rib cage. What are you doing, Murph? The organs that live between here and here are impacted by the musculature in this area and the alignment of the bones in this area and the alignment of the bones in this area. The muscles are there to hold those organs in, but the alignment is still affecting everything. So yeah, it all ties in. So now we're like, wow, does this person have gut issues? Or do they have emotional trauma? Or do they have an old tailbone break? Maybe it's all the above. Like, where in the Venn diagram do I get to work and refer out? What's the genesis? How do I solve that? So if you know this about the tailbone, now you'll at least have the question, instead of being sort of like checkboxed. And, one of the phrases I've been using in our advanced training is, don't be arrogant. Be smart and authoritative and clear and confident, but don't be arrogant that you know. Be humble enough to listen so that the body can tell you, because you don't really know. You're still looking through the skin. So what are possible scenarios, and have you considered them all, and have you listened to hear what the body has to say about that? We have a Tuesday training that we did just on listening. It was really powerful. You guys were all very engaged in that conversation. If that is a good time to go back and refresh yourself on that one, go do that. Anna, did that answer your question? Or is there more?
I guess my yes and no. But you gave me some really interesting information, because my TSM client yesterday, the first one, her tailbone was so curled under, and she spent so much of the time crying. You know, in not just because I was causing pain, but as we were, you know, doing intake and working and et cetera. So that was very interesting what you said, that connection. If it is a movable joint, I'm curious, no, not if, it is a movable joint. I'm curious, how do you get it back? And she had broken her tailbone, by the way. So I mean, it all fits. I'm curious how you would get it back. Obviously, you've got to work on the sacrum and then the rest of the spine. Does the tailbone kind of follow?
Yeah. So first, yes. So let me get to your treatment plan in 1 second. Let me ask you a question though, first for clarity. How do you know her tailbone was tucked under?
Well, I measured her, right? I measured her. And then when I was doing the sacral tubral ligament release, I make sure that I can feel the whole sacrum, you know, so that I can try to locate that little puppy. And so I could feel it was like really, you know, really disappeared, like really. So.
Okay. So first thought, and I'm talking to you as one of our own, be really thoughtful as a non-manual practitioner to trace the sacrum with that depth, especially down to the coccyx. You're basically in someone's bum crack. Just be thoughtful about that. It gets a little dicey. It's like working groin muscles. For a manual practitioner is even dicey. Just be thoughtful about that. We don't measure the coccyx on purpose. And that was my reason for asking you, Anna, not to set you up. But that is the only way that I would know if someone's coccyx was tucked under, is if I manually traced it to find out. And you got to really ask for consent, and you're not a manual, you know, anyway, just be thoughtful about that. I would say that for all of you, right? Just because someone broke their tailbone, just because you suspect that they might have emotional issues, don't ever do that, by the way. It's super armchair psychologist. Doesn't mean that we should just go fingering our way into their coccyx. It's, especially if it's tucked under, there's a reason, right? Like, don't stick your fingers in there. So just be thoughtful about that is my takeaway for that, which is not your question. And in full responsibility, I wanted to offer that. And you did exactly what I would do. If you know that someone broke their tailbone and it's a movable joint that isn't a functional engaging muscles to move it type of joint like the others where we would engage the lever system, you do get to use the functional assist that we have for that. That's where that assist came from, my own broken tailbone. That's why we have it in our training. So I would use that assist to free up the ligaments that are affected by the tailbone break, and then do everything else you know to balance both sides of the pelvis, alignment-wise and muscularly. Rhonda?
So I just want to quickly share that years ago, I was in an auto accident. My coccyx was displaced. I had my chiropractor adjust it, and it held, so it worked. But before he found that misalignment, I was unable to sit for weeks, maybe months. And I remember having to stand through Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant.
Yeah, we say we forget the pain, but just like me, Rhonda, you don't forget that kind of stuff. No. Standing through Thanksgiving dinner, walking around town with a towel in your hand, like you're, you know, putting donuts under your bum, I remember going to a movie with some friends thinking, oh, it'll be relaxing. And I looked at the chair and I was like, oh no, I'm not even going to be able to sit through the movie, even with my donut towel. It's not going to happen. And if you know that someone has a displaced coccyx or a broken tailbone, or if they're, hardly wrapped their tail up underneath them, there is a direct connection to how the feet hit the earth. In fact, I have been open with you, right, about my own tailbone break. And just this week, it's been about 2 weeks, if I'm honest, my little toe on my left foot, really painful. Can't figure it out. But I know I broke that toe. I broke both my baby toes just so that I could have the experience of having a broken bone in my body, but not breaking anything real. And the first one, I was so disgusted. I was like, oh my God, this is how a broken bone feels. And the room was spinning and I thought I was my pinky toe, guys. Like, I see the drama in it now. But at the time I was like, oh, I'm going down. And I remember the apartment I lived in the whole bit. And I laid down on the couch and I waited till the room stopped spinning. And I was like, and I hobbled around on that foot until, the pain went away. Second time I broke a pinky toe on the other foot, I was like, and I went and I reset it right away. And I just grabbed on it because I didn't want it to look all bunky like the other ones. Not that bad, but I didn't want the pain. I didn't want to hobble. I was just like, no, I broke it. I can put it back. And I did. Both feet wildly different now. So 2 weeks ago, when my mangled toe that I didn't address well was starting to hurt, I was like, oh, it's the old bone break. I wonder if it's going to start raining, temperature changes, things that happen in bone tissue. And then all of a sudden, when it wouldn't go away and wouldn't go away and wouldn't go away, I was like, what else could this be? And I was like, oh, the tailbone. No way. And I put myself in a particular position and I did what would be, for those of you trying to figure out the technique, it would be a cross between myofascial and a PNF type of configuration in my body. And for the first time in all these years, I had so much pain on the right side of my tailbone that I was audible. And I'm not usually audible. I mean, like, look, reset my own broken bone. I'm good, But I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I got to listen to my body and ask, like, how did that happen and what's going on there? Sure, I have scar tissue there. Sure, I'm sure I have differences now since I broke my tailbone. And largely it's fixed, right? And broken bones are broken bones, or they're kind of a permanent condition in your body. But the soft tissue around it, the ligaments and the fascia and the tendons around those areas are ever changing. And for whatever reason, I was doing what I've been doing in the last 2 weeks, not treating my pelvis well. And the connection between my right coccyx and my left big toe are real. They're real. The input that comes through your legs into your pelvis, through your innominate to the sacrum and into the tailbone is significant. And so now I feel like we do get to talk about the appendicular skeleton with the sacrum, because I just sort of recognized where that conversation was going. The takeaway from this at this juncture in this conversation was broken tailbones are a big deal. And for those of us who are sacrum-centric, hat tip to you, and you get to also recognize the tailbone there is a movable joint. It's got its own relationship to the body and its own impact on the body, from sacrum to big toe, or sacrum to baby toe and back up again. So I really wanted to land that. Just wrapping up here, I really wanted to get clarity around the quiz questions. Remember, that's where our conversation started on what part of the sacrum is, what's part of the skeleton is the sacrum, and that place of clarity that I knew I got to offer based on the quiz answers on the tailbone, that the sacrum is not the tailbone. It's got its own life. It's got its own impact. It's got its own needs. Different than other areas of the body, for sure. Rare, of course, and really needed if that's the problem. Really needed. So I wanted to make sure we offered clarity on that. Did you guys get value from that bit of clarity, that little bone? That little bone and that crazy little joint. Okay, awesome. Do you guys have any last minute questions before we wrap up for today? Anybody have some questions? Is this going to change how you're going to address your clients this week, this information? Yes, probably. Yes, assuredly. Give me astounding, overwhelming nods.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
going
it's
to
that
change.
awareness, right? I mean, I'm sorry I missed it during our course, I guess, because there's so much fire hose drinking. But Cheryl, are you drowning yet?
No.
Good
No,
girl.
but-
But yeah, that distinction, how important is that? Because I broke my own tailbone and have never made that connection with the other things that are going on in my body because I just assumed it was part of the sacrum. I probably got that answer wrong in whatever quiz, a year ago. So thank you for that distinction. These Tuesday trainings are so valuable because they just you pick these little segments and to reinforce the information or to hear it differently, as the rest of the people here weigh in or ask questions, it just reframes it and makes it absorbable in a more palpable way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Anna. Yeah, community learning fosters growth. That we have science that tells us that that's true. So don't be lone wolves. Join in. I love that you guys are all here. And also, Anna, like you get to hear it not only just differently, but again with a new context, right? Now that you have the whole method, it's like, oh, now I see what I'm supposed to look at instead of what does this all mean? Yeah. So all goodness, all great. You guys, thank you so much for contributing to today's conversation. I didn't realize there were 3 broken tailbones in the room. Are there any others that we didn't actually acknowledge? Anna, Rhonda, and Gina all had broken tailbones in their life. That's a lot. I think those odds are high. So there must be a reason why we all showed up for the training today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for contributing. For those of you who are watching on the replay, hello, we know that you're here. If there was value here for you today, I have one request that you like the YouTube training, the video. I know you're all here with me live on Zoom, but like it on YouTube and share it with a friend. Not everybody knows that we're here, to your point, Anna, that there's a community here and that we're here each week dropping value. So I want to make sure that those who get to have the information know where to find it. Okay, my friends, I look forward to seeing you guys in the Sacred Sacrum course, if that's what's next for you, and certainly next week in Tuesday training. Have an amazing week, and thank you for the incredible work you're doing in the world. Bye, Joshua.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.